Hello, everybody. What is up? Welcome to Dangerous Ideas. It's good to have you all here. It's good to be here as Israel does its best to drag us into World War III. And yet again, I'm using that kind of half a propaganda statement, drag us into, as if the U.S. just can't. We try so hard and we just get dragged into all this awful stuff. I got a lot for you, as always. A little later, we're going to, not too much later, a few minutes, we're going to get into even more proof. I wanted to put all the evidence together that Israel knew October 7th was going to happen. And so I have done that, meaning I found someone who did that. Because I prefer to be lazy as often as possible. And so we're going to be getting into that in a few minutes. But anyway, let's start off with the U.S. is now sending troops, likely thousands, although they're being cagey on the number, sending troops to the Middle East, which is their vague term that basically means Israel. I mean, the U.S. has bases, obviously, in Iraq and other places, so they may send some to those. Obviously, there are some already there. So this AP article says there's roughly 40,000 troops in the region, but I think that's even before they send more troops, because Israel is dragging us, kicking and screaming, into war with Lebanon, a country that has done nothing to us, and a country that, to the extent they've done things to Israel, it's because, and they've said this clearly, because Israel's committing genocide. So it's tough to be like, God, there's awful people trying to stop a genocide. The hell's the matter with them? But so we are sending thousands of troops now to yet another war. I've seen veterans on YouTube, online, talking about how this is horrific. How, one of the well said posts I read was from someone who had been a veteran in Iraq and has now realized that nothing they did there at any point whatsoever, at least not outside of the gains of the ruling elite, but they weren't there we weren't there to stop weapons of mass destruction. We weren't in Iraq killing 1 million people because Iraq had anything to do with 9/11. No, Saddam Hussein was not going to throw anthrax through your living room window. No, he wasn't going to get you. He wasn't living under your desk. There's absolutely no reason we should have been there. And even veterans, and you guys all know that, but even veterans, many of them realize that now, and yet saw their friends die. And even if they didn't see their friends die, or even on top of seeing their friends die, they had to be involved in a killing of innocent people that they thought maybe made sense at the time, but now they realize didn't. And so these veterans are saying, well, what are we doing now? What is this now? It made no sense then. It makes no sense now. And yet here we are doing it again. And Israel is using the same type of propaganda they've been using to justify the genocide in Gaza. They're now using it with Lebanon. They've basically just shifted places, and it's the exact same shit. It's just these animated videos of nonsense that don't prove anything. And this was posted by Ben Rubenstein, a friend of mine who does great work. He, although he didn't create the illustration, but no, of course he didn't create the illustration. This is Israel. This is Israel's animation of what they're going to find in Lebanon. For those of you listening to the podcast, this is like a complete just animation. It's a cartoon, and they just show red things inside buildings, rocket launchers, rockets, UAVs inside the buildings, and then the truck drives out and it fires a missile real quick. I mean, it is just laughable propaganda, and this is the same shit they use to justify genocide in Gaza. It's the same stuff. We don't actually have any proof of this reality, so we just give you drawings. It's the same thing, actually, that Colin Powell held up in front of the UN, right? His mobile weapons lab. Let's get a, just for old time's sake, let's get one of his mobile weapons labs here that Colin Powell had held up in front of the UN. And you'll notice something, that it's drawn. It's a cartoon because it didn't actually exist then. It doesn't exist now. So they don't have real images of these things. They just have pictures of Wile E. Coyote sitting on a missile. And so they just use these cartoons to say, who is falling for this shit? Who is falling for it right now? Who even fell for it back then, but who's falling for it right now? Israel's showing you cartoon animations of missiles in Lebanon. Like, what type of humans think this justifies bombing innocent civilians? Oh, and another animation of a building. Well, the building disappears and inside a missile. And Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner. Like, it's unbelievable that this fools people, but it does. I mean, it works. It worked in Iraq, I guess. I think the type of people that believe this shit are the same ones that, like, you see at Home Depot trying to build something and asking the store clerk, like, with help, but they clearly don't even know what tools are. They're like, I'm going to build a tree fort. Can I get the thing that you hit the other thing? What's the one where you whack the thing with the other? I'm going to build with that. Do you have any of those? I assume those are the same type of people that believe that an animation proves we can bomb civilians. And then, of course, there's the fact that even if there were a missile underneath an apartment building with 17 families living in it, you still can't blow up the 17 families that have nothing to do with your dumb war. You still, like, that's still morally repulsive. Ali Abu Nima put up a great post and a great point about all these headlines saying the U.S. is being dragged into this. Not dragged. He's talking about the headlines, similar headlines where they say we failed. And so Haaretz had the headline, after failing to prevent escalation. Oh, we tried so hard. The U.S. focuses on trying to prevent an Israeli invasion of Lebanon. Okay, we're gonna try that next. We just keep failing. And Ali Abu Nima says, poor hapless United States couldn't prevent genocide in Gaza, even though we tried. Couldn't prevent invasion of Rafah, even though we tried. Couldn't prevent massacre in Lebanon, even though we tried. Won't prevent invasion of Lebanon. Can't stop itself sending 2,000-pound bombs to Israel every day. He says, what a weak, helpless nation, like a baby kitten. It is. This is not good PR for the United States. Oh, we just failed to stop Israel again and again. We keep trying. We're getting so close. We just can't get Israel to stop doing this or that or this or that. Man, this is a weak nation, isn't it? It sounds like a nation that does not get countries to do what they want, which sounds pretty weak. Now, in fact, you and I know the United States is not doing anything to stop Israel's obliteration of Gaza. If they were, they would stop sending them missiles every 36 hours. Okay, that'd be step one, on a long list. That'd be step one. Alan McLeod points out that Israel has sometimes moved on from the Wile E. Coyote animations of their fake weapons in fake people's homes that are supposed to justify them killing civilians. By the way, Israel just killed 500 something, can't remember the exact number, over 500 people in Lebanon. And I guarantee you the vast majority of those are innocent people that had nothing to do with anything. Anyway, Alan McLeod showing that here's an Israeli government post that used an AI-generated image that looks like a photo. For those of you listening to the podcast, it looks like a photo of like a Hezbollah chief sitting next to a poor innocent civilian in her apartment, and he's got a giant missile next to him. And that's what Israel posted. Like, that justifies their AI image that is like laughably fake, supposedly justifies blowing up innocent civilians. mean, it's hilariously fake. But yet, this Israeli government official said Nasrallah is deploying Hezbollah's missiles in the homes of Lebanese citizens, using the civilian population as, you ready for the buzzword? Human shields. Any civilian living near Hezbollah weapons, blah, blah, blah. Same garbage they used in Gaza. Same bullshit, except now they're using AI generated images because guess what? They don't have any real images of this shit because it doesn't exist. And so they just give you the AI versions. I mean, just remarkably repulsive. Remarkably repulsive, but it also shows how AI is altering propaganda. And we knew AI would become a big player in propaganda very soon, and it already is. And here is, I think this is the first example, maybe, of a government basically playing this off like it's a real photo. Now, the photo does look silly enough that you may think, well, most people aren't going to believe that's a real photo, but you'd be surprised what your average people believe. I mean, your average people across America think like the word, thanks to propaganda, they think the word intifada means that a Arab person is going to eat your puppy dog, like with blood dripping down their face. When in fact, the word intifada means revolution. Or they think they like Allah Akbar, right? Is viewed whenever you see it in an American movie or something. It's like terrorists screaming something complete. It's like yelling "Hail Satan" or something. In fact, all it means is what? God is great, I think. So it's Christians say God is great all the time. There's no difference. It translates the same. But thanks to propaganda, a remarkable number of people across America believe that it means like, you know, we're gonna set fire to your children. So who knows what people believe? Maybe people do believe these AI images, and of course, where AI is going is you're going to see a lot of things that are far more realistic than that one with the giant missile in the house. You're going to see things where they make them look grainy. They make them look kind of like it's an image that someone, you know, got leaked out of somewhere. And soon AI is going to be playing a pivotal role because, you know, they often, the expression is, right, that the truth, the lies get around the world before the truth can put on its shoes or whatever, lace up its boots. What you're going to see in not too long, if we don't see this election, is about a week before an election, maybe 3 days before an election. You're going to see AI images that look remarkably real, you know, that show. And again, I think both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris are war criminals, and I have no respect for either of them. But just giving an example here, you know, you see an image released that looks kind of grainy, but clearly seems to show Kamala Harris, you know, snorting lines of coke. And then by the time that it gets debunked or whatever, the election will be over. It will have impacted the election, you know, and that's where AI is going. And so all these people that think AI is not going to impact, AI is stupid. It's going to have a major impact. But anyway, let's hope nobody believes this image of this missile in the middle of a lady's apartment as Israel continues to commit their war crimes. Everybody click thumbs up. Take a second to do it right now. It always helps. And throw in a couple of comments and all that good stuff. Let's see. Here is how I want to show. I always like to highlight the protests as well as highlighting all the shit show. I like to show you that people are continuing to fight out there, even though we're almost at a year of genocide. People are fighting. Here is at Harvard. And, you know, they've added all these rules at Harvard and all the universities. You can't chalk, you can't have tents, you can't, you know, I think you can't talk to each other. I think they outlawed talking to each other as well. Anyway, what they're doing in this Harvard library is they are handing out flyers that say, "Imagine it happened here." And everybody is, or a lot of people are putting them on the back of their laptops while they work so that they each have signs that say, "Imagine it happened here." And many of them are also wearing keffiyehs. But obviously, this is a protest to get everybody to think about this genocide, to keep it on the top of everybody's minds, to not stop protesting despite all the rules, despite the fact that most students are not willing to possibly get suspended or kicked off campus for having a tent or handing out a flyer or whatever. And so, and there's other aspects of this protest. They just showed them chanting outside as well. But many protesters or people that want to get involved don't want to be saying much, unfortunately, because they don't want to get kicked off campus. And so here they are, they just stick it to the back of their laptop. And I think imagine it happened here. There's obviously different ways to get this message out here, but I think it's a good one of the many ways to get the message out there. Imagine if you had in your city tens of thousands of children bombed. Like, what would your reaction be then? Oh, well, as long as it's overseas, it's fine. As long as it's not happening here, I'm all for it. Speaking of children bombed, this is a pretty epic montage. This is the journalist Prim Thakur, and he is one of the few, maybe the only one, that continues to ask our State Department regularly about Hind Rajab, right? The one of the most famous news stories to come out of Gaza. And there's plenty of argument to be made. Why do we talk about one child? Why is this the one that matters when so many children are being murdered? But this is the one, you can have that. I think that's a fair discussion to have. But this is the one that captured people's minds. Okay, so it just is what it is. And this was the little girl who got trapped in her car and called for help because it had been bombed and her parents were dead. And she was trapped in the car and calls for help. And they send the Red Crescent and they send other people to help her. And she, after many hours, she's bombed and killed. And they kill the Red Crescent people trying to get to her. That's what Israel did. And this is one of the biggest stories. Yet the United States continues to just say, there's an ongoing investigation. And it's now been 200 days since that happened. And I'll let the clip speak for itself. For those of you listening to the podcast, this is a journalist in the press room, obviously, asking our State Department officials. I'm going to skip over the part where he just gives a rehashing of what happened to Hind Rajab.
To ask about the status of the inquiry into this.
So I think that question is appropriately directed to the government of Israel. I will say on behalf of the United States, we have made clear to them that we want that incident to be investigated. They have told us they are investigating it.
Israel's investigating itself any day now.
It's our understanding that investigation is not yet complete. Should direct questions to them about where it stands, but we want to see it completed as soon as possible. And as I said from this podium several days ago, if accountability is appropriate, we want to see accountability put in place.
Any updates on Hind Rajab's
29 days later
killing of Hind Rajab's family and the paramedics sent to save her?
I don't have an update. My understanding is that the investigation is ongoing.
Now this is 65 days later.
So I'm wondering if you have updates on not just the investigations, but actual accountability measures in response to these. And if not, how can this administration's approach of relegating things to months-long investigations while not changing policy, all as thousands more are killed, be a justified approach?
Investigations in some cases take time. You heard me a minute ago say we want them in every case to be conducted swiftly, but not at the expense of thoroughness. So we will continue to press for not just full investigations, but when warranted, all appropriate accountability measures.
101 days later.
Secondly, it's been 101 days now since Hind Rajab, her family members, medics sent to save her were killed. So first question related to that is there an update on the investigation into that attack?
I don't have anyone. I'm happy to go back and get you the latest.
Okay.
128 days later.
Is there an update into this investigation?
Let me get you an answer on that and come back to you.
147 days later.
Is it really an independent investigation if the alleged culprits are the ones conducting the strike?
What I said, we thought it's appropriate for the government of Israel to investigate. They have said to us, and again, as I said, I'm not attesting to any of these facts. I can tell you that we intervene with them. They provide us answers. I'm providing them to you. What they have said is they went to these agencies and asked for information, and it wasn't forthcoming.
Sure. So on that note, you said that the Red Crescent, the UN hasn't provided answers. Will you move to verify those claims?
It is not for us to do it.
We're not going to verify any claims. 184 days since she was killed.
Last month, when myself and other colleagues asked about the investigation into this, the department said Israel said that they're still investigating, and that Israel also said that the UN and Red Crescent did not respond to outreach from the Israeli government. I reached out to the Red Crescent, and they said that no, the Israeli government did not reach out. So has the Biden-Harris administration followed up on this alleged lie about the Israeli government, or sought to confirm any of Israel's claims on the half-year-old killing now of this girl and her family?
So we are in touch with our partners in Israel around the clock on a variety of issues. I don't have any specifics to read out as it relates to this conversation. I'm happy to check if there have been any additional updates, but to my understanding, this investigation is still ongoing, and I will leave it to them to speak to the details of it.
So I had reached out to the Israeli government as well, and while I was reaching out to the Red Crescent, they said they would get back to me with an answer, and that they did not. After we reported, the Red Crescent said that
well, it's really, I'm not a spokesperson for the responsiveness of another foreign minister.
That, you know, this government gives them billions of dollars in aid. I imagine that such claims want to be fact-checked.
So we will continue to engage with our partners in Israel. We ask them for additional information. We ask questions when we see incidents unfold, and we'll continue to do that. As it relates to this incident, I'm not aware of any updates, and I believe this investigation is ongoing.
197 days.
It's now 197 days since Hindu Job was killed, her family members were killed, the medics said they were killed. What's the update on that?
I don't have any updates for you. Go ahead.
And that is it. You repulsive pieces of shit. He continues to ask. It's now been 200 days since Hind Rajab was murdered by the Israeli military, a 6-year-old girl and her family. And the truth is, the United States and the people that work inside the powerful entities of the United States and the Israeli government and the people that work at the top of the Israeli government do not give a flying fuck about human beings that are not the wealthy elite, not the people in power. And this couldn't be more clear in this montage of, okay, well, rather than just take a bunch of numbers, rather than just say 40,000 people are killed, have been killed, 41,000. Rather than just talk about numbers, let's get into a detail. Let's talk about a specific human being, and we will see what is being done to give a shit about how they died, why they were murdered, why Israel bombed her. Let's get into one human being. And they can't do that, and they won't do that, and they will never do that. And so instead they say, oh, we're really looking into this. Oh man, big investigation. Now let's ignore the fact that of course Israel's not going to investigate themselves. Why would Israel ever care to investigate their own awful shit? They wouldn't. So it's not a real investigation to begin with. But let's put that aside and pretend the United States and Israel are separate entities and say, is the United States really pressing Israel for this investigation? No, they don't even care to begin to ask about why this investigation hasn't been done, what it found. It doesn't matter. Thank you, M. Samati, for the super chat. Really appreciate it. Solidarity. And it begs the question, why do we keep this kabuki theater going? Why do we keep this show going? Why are all these people sitting in this room, some of them consider themselves journalists? Why do we keep it going? What honestly is the point? Oh, we're getting that investigation any day now. We're just working on it. Yeah, I can't speak for a foreign government, but any moment, why do we do this? What is the point? What is the goddamn point of this ridiculous theater that they play? It's just totally unbelievable. Okay. One more note, and then I'm going to get to a detailed list of how Israel knew October 7th was going to happen. Because I wanted to find somewhere where we kind of put all of those facts together in a better way. But here's one more point, posted by Greg Stoker. In the past week, Israel has normalized the following: kicking bodies off of 4-story rooftops for fun. There was that video going around of them throwing Palestinian bodies off a rooftop for no reason. Booby trapping and detonating civilian devices with no accountability of location in contravention of the law of land warfare. Number 3, shutting down press bureaus by military order. That's Al Jazeera in the West Bank. Number 4, genocide sightseeing cruises across the Mediterranean. I didn't even know about those. These are just few of the things that Israel has normalized in the past 4 days. Of course, if you go back more than 4 days and you talk about the past 11 months, Israel seems to be attempting to normalize genocide. They're normalizing just indiscriminate bombing, carpet bombing of innocent civilians. They're normalizing bombing of hospitals. They're normalizing bulldozing of cemeteries. They're normalizing targeting of journalists. They've normalized so much absolutely repulsive, morally disgusting behavior in just a few months, or attempted to. I mean, it's not going to become normal for me, but sadly, I think it's becoming normal for a lot of people out there. Okay, let's cut real quick. Let's see what a couple of you guys have to say. OSO says they don't care about brown people. They do care about white people. Look at Ukraine. That's a good point. Michael McGoldrick says the USA, the EU, the UK are guilty of genocide and infanticide. Yes, I mean, at minimum, they're facilitating it. The Grateful Steve says the state of Missouri is set to murder an innocent man today. Free Marcellus Williams. Yes, I was going to bring you that a little later. I brought that story to you yesterday. Marcellus Williams, innocent man, set to be executed at 6 p.m. Central Time. Today, the Missouri Supreme Court ignored the recommendation or ruled against the recommendation that he be set free and that his conviction be vacated, which was requested by both the prosecution and the defense, which is incredibly rare that both the prosecution and the defense say this basically is an innocent man, or at minimum, you can't prove his guilt. And yet they, at this moment, are going through with it in, I think, 4 hours, 3.5 hours. Totally repulsive. But, and you know, what do these two things have in common? The story of Israel and Hin Rajab and everything, and Marcellus Williams. It is the complete lack of even a moment of care for innocent people, for civilians, for their lives. Our state institutions across America have this same sociopathic lack of care for human lives that you see by the Israeli government, by the U.S. government. It goes all the way up. And Cray97 is asking if Biden could pardon him. I believe Biden probably could pardon him. Also could the governor of the state. But yeah, I believe so. I don't know why Biden wouldn't have the power to pardon him. Okay, I want to move on to a bunch of the proof, not just one or two pieces of proof, but a long list of proof that Israel knew October 7th was coming. And I went ahead and took a poll of you guys over on my YouTube community page, and 500 of you have already voted. Did Israel know October 7th was going to happen? 94% say yes, they knew. So that's a pretty significant vote there. And then I did the same vote on Twitter. Did Israel know October 7th was going to happen beforehand? 93% say yes, Israel knew. And that's 218 votes. So all told, we've got 720 votes so far. I mean, I just put those up an hour ago. So it seems you guys are pretty certain that Israel knew Israel knew October 7th was going to happen, and yet allowed it to happen, because that's the next assumption. Is if they knew it was going to happen, it must be a case of allowing it to happen. Now, why would they do that? Well, they wanted to commit this genocide. They wanted to commit this ethnic cleansing. We know they don't care about the hostages. We know they don't care about innocent civilians. We watched on October 7th as the IDF murdered hundreds of Israelis. Now, we don't know the exact number. Obviously, many of those killed on October 7th were killed by Hamas, but many were killed by the IDF, hundreds. But let's get to the proof. And this was posted by censored men, but many of these things I've verified, or I have covered some of these stories in the past, but I wanted to put them all together into one segment. 1 year ago, Israeli military and intelligence officials obtained a 40-page document which outlined Hamas's battle plan for October 7th. Israeli authorities codenamed the document Jericho Wall. The document did not set a date for the attack, but when compared to October 7th, it becomes extremely clear that Hamas carried out the attack almost exactly as the blueprint showed. The document called for drones to knock out security cameras and automated machine guns along the border, a barrage of rockets at the beginning of the attack, and Hamas fighters to pour into Israel via paragliders, motorcycles, and on foot. All of that took place on October 7th. The blueprint that Israel obtained was almost identical to October 7th. They also said in the blueprint that the aim was to take roughly 200 to 250 hostages, which was almost exactly how many they took. It was like 200 some hostages. Hamas also had information on sensitive Israeli data. This would be another piece of evidence that somebody within Israel was involved. The fact that Hamas had so much access to sensitive data. They knew details about the location and size of Israeli military forces, details on Israeli communication hubs, details on key Israeli military bases. This led to Israeli officials suspecting leakers within Israel's security establishment. The 40-page document circulated widely among the Israeli military and intelligence leaders, but they claim that they thought the attack was of such a magnitude that was beyond Hamas's capabilities. Now, what we can move the debate. You can move the goalpost as to did Israel know that October 7th was going to happen, and you can move that to did they know but just think it wouldn't happen. They knew all the details. They knew every detail, and I would say that's an impossibility. There's no way Israel knows every detail of what's going to happen and chooses not to stop any of it. And the idea that they don't have a crazy number of spies within Hamas and a crazy amount of surveillance of Hamas means that Israel would also know when things were ramping up. And there's evidence of that as well. By the way, this is the New York Times article. I've shown this New York Times article probably 2 or 3 times on this show, saying Israel knew Hamas's attack plan more than a year ago. That's from the New York Times. Even the liberal New York Times wants you to know Israel knew about this attack a year ago. Okay, so then here's 3 months prior. In July of last year, a veteran analyst with Unit 8200, Israel's signals intelligence agency, warned that Hamas had been conducting training exercises that were very similar to what was outlined in Jericho Wall. So 3 months before, they go, hey, they're behaving just like the blueprint thing he said they would. Hey, they're doing the things. They're getting ready for the thing in the blueprint that we read, that we all read. You remember? You remember the thingy? The analyst said, quote, I utterly refute that the scenario is imaginary. The Hamas training exercise fully matched the content of Jericho Wall, she said. Quote, it is a plan designed to start a war, she added. Quote, it's not just a raid on a village, unquote. However, a colonel in Israel's Gaza division brushed off her concerns and said the exercise was part of a totally imaginative scenario and that it wasn't anything that Hamas could pull off. Again, I find it, I mean, you guys can let me know. I want to know your take on whether Israel just knew every detail, like literally every detail of what was going to happen October 7th. And yet at every level of the Israeli military, the Israeli government that knew, at every level, no one decided to take it seriously. To me, that considering the amount of intelligence amount of surveillance they have on Hamas. The odds of that are non-existent in my mind. But I do want to get your take on whether that's even possible that Israel could just ignore all of this, considering most of what Israel does all day, every day, is decide how to terrorize Hamas and Palestinians and how to stop them from having any impact on Israel. Then 3 days prior, okay, so now we're getting close. And if you want to make the argument that, well, they knew exactly what was going to happen, but because they didn't know the date, they were still caught off guard by the exact thing they knew would happen. Well, you can't even make that argument because 3 days prior, the head of the U.S. House of Representatives Foreign Affairs Committee, Michael McCaul, told reporters that Egypt had, quote, warned the Israelis 3 days prior that an event like this could happen. Quote, I don't want to get too much into classified information, but a warning was given. Furthermore, an Egyptian intelligence official told AP News that Cairo had given the Israelis multiple warnings about something big being planned in Gaza. Quote, we have warned them. An explosion of the situation is coming and very soon, and it would be big. But they underestimated such warnings. Did they? Or did they perhaps want their own 9/11, their own Pearl Harbor, their own big moment that would allow them to commit genocide? And again, we know that the IDF killed hundreds of Israelis on October 7th. So if you didn't want Israelis to get hurt on October 7th, maybe you wouldn't have killed hundreds of them. I'm just spitballing here. Just an idea. If you cared at all about Israeli civilians, maybe you wouldn't murder them all. Is there an idea? Murder hundreds. Just saying. Netanyahu denied that he ever got such warnings, which to me, that may be one of the biggest pieces of proof that Israel wanted this to happen. We know Netanyahu got the warnings. There's no way Egypt, the government of Egypt, contacted the government of Israel, said, this is happening and soon, and no one told Netanyahu. It was just, they were like, he's having a case of the Mondays. I don't think now's a good time to tell him about the fact that there's going to be a massive attack. It's a real solid case of the Mondays, like really strong one, didn't have a good Shabbat. And it's just kind of snowballed from there. And then there's the insider trading that went on. Traders earned millions short selling stocks days ahead of October 7th. Unidentified traders, well, I lost it. Damn it. One second. This is Twitter for you. It just blows. Here we go. Unidentified traders made wagers against the worth of a bundle of Israeli stocks just 5 days before Hamas entered Israel. This resulted in a significant spike in short selling of that fund, according to a study by New York University School of Law and Columbia School of Law. Our findings suggest that traders informed about the coming attacks profited from these tragic events, Jackson and Mitz wrote. They said the short selling that day far exceeded the short selling that occurred during numerous other periods of crisis, including the recession following the financial crisis, the 2014 Israel-Gaza war, and the COVID-19 pandemic. So they're saying that even other big crises didn't have this level of short selling, meaning someone didn't just know there'd be some Hamas attack. They knew this would be a large Hamas attack, that this would be significant. And this was even covered by the Washington Post. So again, and you may have friends. I know people who, if you say, oh, they knew about October 7th, they go, I haven't seen it. That's not true. What are your sources? Much of this is even reported in the mainstream outlets. There's a New York Times article. There's a Washington Post article about the short selling. And you can't understate just how much surveillance Israel has of Gaza and Hamas. The idea that they wouldn't know is just stupid. It's really ignorant of the type of surveillance Israel's involved in. And the and the fact that there were videos of Hamas training on the hang gliders that they themselves posted on Instagram. It's so really the only debate, in my eyes, the only debate that can be had is whether Israel knew about this and is just so dopey and negligent. They're just bumbling fools, and they just didn't even think to ever do anything to stop it, or whether Israel knew about this and they chose to allow it to happen in order to justify a genocide. Because we know they don't care about the hostages. So if they don't care about the hostages, because we've seen how much Netanyahu's fought against the ceasefire at every moment because he just wants the genocide to continue. He doesn't want hostages back. He would prefer they all die. So if they don't care about hostages and they don't care about Israeli civilians, then this is a great plan for them, right? You got to think in the mind. You got to put yourself, in the mind of a psychopath. Like, if you just want to kill everybody in Gaza, but you want it to look like you were doing something else, you weren't committing genocide because you look bad. So you want it to look like something else. Then what do? Well, you have to have something to spark it off. You have to have something to allow it to happen. You have to have something to pretend to justify it. You need an October 7th. And now we see also that Israel's ethnic cleansing steadily in the West Bank now. So that proves that this isn't about Hamas. And then, of course, I brought you all the other evidence that Netanyahu and the others are looking to wipe Palestine off the map. Literally, Netanyahu, 12 days before October 7th, in front of the UN, held up a map of Israel with Palestine and Gaza erased. Okay. I'm going to move on to mass corruption in the NYPD, because that's a fun story. If you guys get a second, click thumbs up, click share, click subscribe. It's important to follow several of my channels because I could be banned at any time. My old YouTube channel was banned, so I hope you will subscribe on YouTube. But I hope you will also subscribe on Rumble, rumble.com/LeeCamp. And I hope you will join my free email list at leecamp.com. That will get you alerted about my videos if other things are deleted, if I'm banned in other ways. So it would be amazing if you sign up for free at leecamp.com. And then if you want to support the show, there's always locals. leecamp.net will forward you to my locals. And patreon.com/leecamp. And you get all kinds of perks. Okay, let's get to NYPD. Let's get to one of my faves. I lived there for 12 years. Still kind of a New Yorker. They brought in an interim NYPD head because the last one was corrupt and has federal charges against him. So they brought in a new one, and then 10 days later, the federal agents raided the new guy's house. Thomas Donlan, who only 10 days ago assumed command of the NYPD after Commissioner Edward Cabin's resignation amid a federal probe, is now the subject of a federal probe. It's like, literally, they just have to keep lining people up. They're like, next NYPD commissioner. Can you just step to the right, please? Just next. Okay, he's been raided. Okay, next. On Friday, September 20th, federal authorities executed search warrants at my residences, said Donlan. The admission is the latest in a cascade of federal investigations that have engulfed top aides to Mayor Eric Adams, Mayor Eric Adams used to be a NYPD officer. Mayor Eric Adams and top NYPD officials. Donlin himself, a former FBI agent, was a rare out-of-department appointment brought in to lead the NYPD amid growing concerns about agency leadership and credibility. They are corrupt as a motherfucker. Half dozen criminal inquiries currently swirling around the mayor, his aides, and NYPD brass. Despite the growing number of investigations, neither the mayor nor his aides have been formally accused of a crime. Except that they're stepping down because they're in the middle of a federal probe. So there is that. But here's some more of NYPD's mass corruption. And of course, I brought you the story the other day of how the NYPD, they've spent something like $150 million to stop $150,000 of fare jumpers. And that resulted in 4 people getting shot after someone jumped the fare. Because if someone skips out on that $2.90, you got to shoot them. I mean, you just don't have a choice there. But here's another aspect, and probably has to do with the fact that they have spent so much money putting NYPD officers on every subway train. NYPD overtime pay in the subway went from $4 million to $155 million this year. That's their overtime. That's what happens when you have an NYPD. That's what happens when you have a police officer as your mayor. He just tells the cops to go nuts, to go fucking nuts. And they are. Their overtime went from $4 million to $155 million, according to city records. And then they, and then of course they're involved in this shooting recently of the fare jumper. Just corruption through and through. Now, this is nothing new. I need you to understand that. NYPD has been corrupt forever. So don't be shocked that there is corruption at the NYPD. It's really just what they do. But I thought I'd bring you one more story on connection to crime and punishment, even though this is not specifically the NYPD. But this is the difference in the punishment in our system. And a homeless man was given 15 years in prison for stealing $100. On the other hand, ex-mortgage CEO was sentenced, Paul Allen, was sentenced to 40 months in prison for a $3 billion fraud. The CEO of what had been one of the nation's largest privately held mortgage lenders was sentenced Tuesday to more than 3 years in prison for his role in the $3 billion scam. Well, scheme. One of the biggest corporate frauds in U.S. history. $3 billion. He got 5 years. Sorry, 3 years. He got 3 years in prison. Homeless man steals $100. He got 15 years. That is how our justice system works. Massively different for the poor versus the wealthy, for the lowest on the totem pole versus the highest. And this is for the wealthy that are actually prosecuted at all. Most are given a slap on the wrist. Most, people, they go, well, it's tough to prove that he knew what he was doing was wrong, etc. So this is a rarity that this guy got locked up at all. But in the case they are locked up, just compare the prison sentences of the poor versus the rich. This is how our justice system works. And this proves an aspect of our justice system that I have tried to say many times, but there aren't many people that really talk about this aspect. Our legal system, the laws, how the laws are enforced, how the laws are prosecuted, etc., how criminals are prosecuted, etc. All of that was designed by, and this is one of those core levels of reality, getting down a little deeper. Who designed our legal system? Who designed the laws? Who designed how the laws are enforced? The rich, almost exclusively. The elites of the elite, the judges, the top lawyers, the people writing literally are the bills in Congress, etc. So it is the elitist of the elite, almost entirely white men, but we'll put that aside for the moment, who decide these laws and then decide how to prosecute the people who violate these laws. And so we don't actually have a justice system that like is equal, is blind, right? That's the big myth. The justice is blind. Well, even if you had a perfect judge who was completely unbiased, and you had a perfect prosecutor and a perfect defense attorney, and they're all unbiased and they're all doing their best, even if you had all of that, systematically, this was designed to help the rich. It was designed to be better for the rich. It was designed to make it so that if the rich get caught doing something, it's not truly fraud. Whereas if you get caught taking $5 out of someone's pocket, that is a real crime. And this story also fits with what I showed you yesterday, the chart I showed you yesterday of wage theft in this country. Whereas far more people, I don't know, hardly anyone's ever prosecuted for wage theft, but even though monetarily, the street crime, the petty larceny and stuff like that doesn't amount to a half of the amount of wage theft across this country. And yet wage theft criminals are almost never prosecuted. The people that tell you, oh, if you are still cleaning up, after 6 p.m., you got to clock out and keep cleaning. That's wage theft. That's overtime theft. And when was the last time someone was prosecuted for that? Never. The closest you'll get is every once in a while there'll be a big case and they'll win something against McDonald's or someone, and McDonald's will owe $1 billion or whatever, 500 million to their workers across many states, and then each worker gets a few $100s or $1,000 or something, but no one goes to jail. None of those McDonald's execs who made those decisions to steal from the workers go to jail. Essentially never. And so this CEO going to jail is actually a rarity. And yet he was sentenced to 3 years, while the homeless man who stole $100 gets 15 years. There's also that the homeless man was in Louisiana. Louisiana is one of the worst 3 strikes and you're out garbage law states, where there's also other stories where people are locked up for, people in Louisiana are locked up for life. They get a life sentence for stealing a jacket, like life in prison because they took a jacket. Because before that, they had a charge of, having a joint or some shit. It's all about who writes the laws. Do you get it? It's not about whether you're breaking the laws, because the rich are breaking the laws every fucking day. It's about who writes the laws. All right, let's move to, I suppose you could call this a good news story, although it infuriates me because, well, you see why it infuriates me. But so Manchester in the UK has decided to use Finland's magic bullet, magic wand, whatever, silver bullet, whatever special magic thing that you want to call it, to solve homelessness. It's a miracle. In the headline, they call it a miracle cure for homelessness. Manchester's going to try Finland's miracle cure for homelessness. You know what the miracle cure for homelessness is? Giving everyone a home. So it's so infuriatingly obvious. But now you have Manchester decided to try it. Greater Manchester will become the first region in the UK to adopt a, quote, housing first philosophy, just like Finland. The so-called miracle cure solution gives people homes when they need them without conditions attached, and has brought down homelessness by 70% in Finland and eradicated poverty-based homelessness completely. Meaning the 30% that are still homeless in Finland, it's not due to poverty. It's due to mental illness. And I was going to say, or the fact that they just really want to be living on the street, but that would be also probably mental illness. Anyway, and one of the key words here is without conditions attached, because in a lot of cases they go, oh, well, we'll give them, in some states in the U.S., they talked about policies like this. We'll give them a house. We'll give them an apartment. We'll give them an apartment for free if they abide by all these rules that we don't even abide by. Like, we'll give them an apartment for free if they never test positive for a drug, if they're never seen with a beer, if they never have a glass of wine, if they always are, trying to find work and they can prove they were trying to find work, if they don't have any pets, they don't have a dog, they don't have a cat, if they never have more than one person in their apartment, so they don't have a girlfriend, they don't have like all of these random policies that the people creating these ideas, these laws, these projects by the state, they don't abide by any of that. Blatant hypocrisy. Like, are you really going to tell me that everybody in like a state legislature never has a drink, never does a drug, never had a pet? Like, so, because I think someone told me about this, about Utah in the United States. They eradicated homelessness by, wait for it, giving everyone an apartment who needed one. And this was back in like 2015. And then several years ago, they got rid of that program because it worked too well. And they didn't like that. So they got rid of that program. And now homelessness is back. They eradicated something like 95% of all homelessness. Now, I had one or two people email me to say, it's not what you think. Yes, they offered us an apartment, but sometimes they were not in areas that people wanted to live. And also they, I think one of them said they wouldn't allow my dog. And of course, many people view their dogs as like their children. So they're not going to give up their dog. So, there, all these stipulations. And the truth is, you shouldn't give them any stipulations. We live in a post-scarcity world. Literally, there could be a roof over everybody's head. Literally, everyone could have clean water. Literally, everyone could have clothing and shoes and nice things. Like, you could have a happy life. This is the most fucked up. We have 17 million empty homes sitting across this country. And we go, oh, we did homelessness. What are we going to do? It's bullshit. And we have tried in Finland, in Utah, and now in Manchester, but there are other countries, other states that have tried a crazy policy where they give people who don't have homes an apartment. And guess what? Those people are no longer homeless. Ta-da! And it's just like a base level of morality, a base level of having a soul. And this also speaks to the fact that you should take the good ideas. Again, I can't believe that I need to like say these things, but it's obvious that most of the people in our country don't do them and don't even seem to consider them. You should take the good ideas when you see them somewhere, and you should implement them where you are. Wow, mind blown. If you see a state that got rid of 95% of homelessness, you should go, what did they do? Oh, they gave them all apartments. Let's do that here. If you see a state that decreased their prison population by 20%, you should go, what did they do? Oh, they stopped locking people up for 3 years because they had a joint. Let's do that here. If you see a state who managed to get affordable health care for everybody, you should look at that and go, what did they do? Oh, they did A, B, and C. If you see a state that managed to wipe out a lot, or cities are doing this now, wipe out most of their citizens' medical debt, which I know is not a thing outside of the United States, but They managed to wipe out their. Oh, how'd they do it? Oh, they went to RIP medical debt and they bought the debt for pennies on the dollar and erased it, and it cost the city almost nothing and made lives better for thousands of people who had crushing debt. Let's do it here. And that's how it should work. And instead, because we live in a capitalist system, because the ruling elite are mostly sociopaths, because they are mostly frauds and scam artists, and that's how they got elected, and that's why they're there, and that's how they keep their job. Because of that, they're not interested in the answers. They're not interested in the things that worked. They're not interested in doing what would help people. Even though you can look around the states, around the world, around the nations, you can look and go, well, that's working, that's working, that's working, that's working. I mean, how many, actually, this was part of the plot, part of the theme, part of the point of Michael Moore's Who to Invade Next, which, by the way, if you didn't see that one, it was years ago, but if you didn't see that one, the title makes you think that it's about U.S. wars. And instead, what it's about is looking at the good ideas of other countries. And, you know, his point is who to invade and like steal their ideas, I guess. It was a dumb title. But the point is, you know, and he goes to different countries. He goes like Denmark and finds out how great their schooling is, for example, or whatever. And why don't we do the things that work? No. Why would we? Why would we do the things that work? Literally, you could run for office on a platform of do the things that work. And it actually would mean something. I know people would read it and just be like, duh. No, not duh. We literally don't do most of the things that work. We literally run from the things that work. Utah had a thing that worked and they then canceled it. And you see that fairly often. Okay, I want to get to some of your comments before I wrap things up here. Juan Carlos says, Lee makes me laugh at the weirdest times. That is the goal, my friend. I'm glad I get to do that for you. Andrew Beazle says the worldwide yearly GDP translates so that every working age person in the world could earn the equivalent of $127,000 a year. I did not know that, but that number does not shock me. That sounds okay. Andrew corrects himself and says $63,000 per person, but $127,000 per couple. But yeah, most of the world, I think it's still like 50% of the world lives on $2 a day. So now imagine that if you actually distributed the money equally, you just have billions of people living far better lives. Marika Voss says, I am one of those working unhoused with teens looking for housing. I'm very sorry to hear that, Marika. I hope you find housing soon. This is a fucked up country. Franco de Jesus says, same bullshit in the UK. It won't change anything. It won't change anytime soon. If ever, the system only serves those who make the rules. Nikki Rivernine says, yes, we are in that hierarchy where it's one rule for us and none for them. Spiffity Keen says the U.S. is the largest corporate work camp on earth. I like that. Corporate work camp. I mean, that's what wage slavery is. And of course, we're not the only country with wage slavery, but perhaps it's worse in the United States because in a lot of other countries, it's still set up on wage slavery. People still go to work every day, a lot. But David Nathan's mentioning the retirement age. He says the retirement age is 55 or 60 in China. Retirement age is different in most of these countries, much lower than the United States. But it's not just the retirement age. It's that people it's wage slavery, but people don't worry that if they lose their job, they'll be homeless in a lot of other countries. People don't worry that if they lose their job, they'll literally have no health care. People don't worry that if they lose their job, they'll just be treated like utter garbage. That is different in a lot of countries. I'm not saying all of them, but a lot of them. And so I imagine it makes wage slavery a little more bearable, perhaps. Stolen TPS report says Peter Joseph talks about the anger dollar. Sums it up pretty well. The anger dollar. He also talks about one of the things I like that Peter Joseph talks about is in-system and out-system activism. In-system activism, basically, is the type of things you see most larger groups do. It's the type of thing that it's kind of like, oh, well, we can work with you while we protest you. Out of system activism is where you try and fuck up the systems. You try and interrupt the business. You try and get in the way. And he makes the point, it's similar to points I've made many times, that it's only the out system activism. It's only the activism that interrupts business, that makes things difficult, that actually creates change generally, almost always. Creative Experiment says 1.8 billion people could have free electricity today. Carl says the retirement age is 75 in the UK. Is that true? That's pretty awful. Well, and of course, retirement age, if you don't have a pension, retirement age means, yeah, you get Social Security, but Social Security is low enough that depending on what part of the nation you live in, it's not actually livable. So if you don't have tons of money saved, then that's why you see people working at, the cash register at Walmart when they're 80 years old. It's not that they're not getting Social Security. They are, but it's not enough to live in that area. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up. There's no show tomorrow. I do Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. So I will be back Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, with another one. But I would love if you guys see fit to support this show and to help it continue. And you can do that by joining up at patreon.com/LeeCamp. The lowest level is $6 a month. Or at leecamp.net, my locals page, scroll down to become a subscriber. And that lowest level is also $6 a month, 38 cents an episode. And you get all kinds of free shit, man. Do you not want free shit? Are you not entertained? You get my ebooks, Dangerous Ideas, and Bullet Points and Punchlines. You get extra segments. You get my comedy special, Laughing All the Way to the Shitstorm. You get all that good stuff just for signing up at 38 cents an episode. I don't know. Seems worth it to me, man. I asked myself, just like Israel's investigating itself, I asked myself what I think of joining, becoming a member for $6 a month, and I think it's good. I think it's great. It just sounds really cool to me. I don't know why. I just think it sounds like a cool thing to do. All right, I will see you guys Thursday, but I'm always putting up extra segments, so you can check back youtube.com/Moment of Clarity or on Rumble and get extra stuff. And see you Thursday. Keep fighting.